I'm about to share an unsettling experience that changed my life forever. It all began when I sought help for a persistent health issue and ended up in the clutches of a doctor whose methods were anything but conventional. What I discovered about him and his practices is a tale that will haunt me for years to come. I walked into the clinic with a sense of desperation. For months, I'd been battling a mysterious illness that no conventional treatment seemed to alleviate. My regular doctor had exhausted all traditional methods and finally suggested that I see Dr. Alfred, a so-called specialist known for his unconventional approaches. The clinic itself was unsettling, hidden away in a dilapidated part of town. It had an eerie, almost forgotten aura. The faded sign outside read Dr. Alfred, innovative healing. I could barely make out the letters through the grime covering the glass door. When I entered, the reception area was dimly lit, with old medical equipment scattered around like forgotten relics. Dr. Alfred himself was an imposing figure, a man of average height with sharp eyes and an air of unsettling calm. His office was an odd combination of the old and the new, with ancient medical texts piled beside cutting-edge diagnostic machines. He greeted me with a chilling smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. After a brief examination, he began discussing his methods. He spoke of techniques so far removed from mainstream medicine that they seemed almost mythical. He promised rapid results, but his assurances were laced with a tone of menace that I couldn't ignore. Against my better judgment, I agreed to the treatment. It began with what he called a transformation therapy, a procedure that involved a series of injections mixed with mysterious dark liquids. He claimed these substances would rewire my body's responses and eradicate the illness. The first few sessions seemed to bring some relief, but as time went on, the side effects grew more severe. My nights became plagued with disturbing dreams, and my health, rather than improving, seemed to deteriorate. My body was reacting in ways I could never have anticipated. I grew weaker, and strange, almost supernatural symptoms began to manifest: strange rashes, unexplainable pains, and visions that blurred the line between reality and nightmare. The clinic, too, seemed to change. Shadows lingered longer in the corners, and I began to hear whispering voices echoing through the empty halls. The staff, once courteous, now avoided eye contact and seemed to be growing increasingly uncomfortable around me. Desperation drove me to investigate Dr. Alfred further. I discovered disturbing rumors about his past, stories of patients who had vanished without a trace or suffered horrifying fates. It became clear that his methods were not just unorthodox, but dangerously malevolent. He was manipulating and experimenting on his patients, treating them as subjects in a twisted, unethical quest for knowledge. One night, after a particularly harrowing session, I overheard a conversation between Dr. Alfred and one of his assistants. They spoke of harvesting results and perfecting the process, with no regard for the human cost. Realizing that I might be the next subject in his horrific experiments, I knew I had to escape. But leaving wasn't simple. Dr. Alfred's clinic had become a labyrinth of terror. The exits seemed to shift and vanish, and the staff's once sympathetic faces were now twisted into menacing masks. My attempts to flee were thwarted at every turn, and the atmosphere grew thicker with a palpable sense of dread. In the end, I managed to break free, but the experience left scars that no conventional treatment could ever heal. Dr. Alfred's clinic was eventually shut down after several patients, including myself, came forward with their horrifying stories. Yet, the trauma remains, and the memories of those ghastly treatments haunt me every day. As I try to rebuild my life, the memories of my time at Dr. Alfred's clinic lingered like shadows at the edge of my consciousness. The physical scars eventually healed, but the psychological wounds were much deeper. Festering with each passing day, my dreams were plagued by images of that grim clinic, and the whispers from those darkened halls haunted me at every turn. My efforts to resume a normal life were met with increasing difficulty. I found it hard to trust medical professionals, and any mention of unconventional treatments filled me with dread. I became withdrawn, haunted by a pervasive sense of paranoia. The thought of Dr. Alfred still out there, possibly continuing his dark practices, gnawed at me relentlessly. Months passed, and I attempted to seek solace in a new routine. I engaged in therapy, hoping to confront the trauma I had endured. Despite my best efforts, I remained trapped in a cycle of anxiety and fear. My therapist suggested that writing about my experience might help me process the trauma. It was a difficult task, but I reluctantly agreed, finding some relief in putting my story into words. During one of my sessions, I received an anonymous letter. The letter was brief, but its content was chilling. It described details of the clinic and its operations that only someone with intimate knowledge could have known. The letter's author warned that Dr. Alfred was still at large and suggested that the clinic's sinister operations had only been the tip of the iceberg. Determined to find closure, I began an investigation into Dr. Alfred's whereabouts. I contacted former patients and staff members who had remained silent out of fear. Many shared similar accounts of being manipulated and mistreated. It became evident that Dr. Alfred had a network of followers who aided in his heinous practices, making him an elusive target for authorities. My quest for answers led me to an old contact who had been involved in exposing similar organizations. With their help, we began compiling evidence and building a case against Dr. Alfred and his associates. The process was fraught with danger. Attempts to intimidate and silence us were frequent. Nevertheless, we persisted, driven by a shared goal to bring justice to those who had suffered. Finally, after months of relentless investigation, we managed to gather enough evidence to prompt a major crackdown on the organization. Dr. Alfred's clinic was raided, and many of his accomplices were apprehended. The authorities were shocked by the scale of the operation and the depth of the horrors uncovered. Although the legal proceedings and media coverage brought some semblance of justice, the scars of my experience would never fully heal. I continued to struggle with my fears and anxieties, but I found solace in knowing that I had contributed to exposing the dark secrets of Dr. Alfred and his malevolent organization. In the end, sharing my story became a way to reclaim my power and confront the shadows that had once controlled my life. My experience with Dr. Alfred was a chapter of horror and suffering, but it also became a catalyst for resilience and change. And as I move forward, I carry with me the knowledge that even in the darkest corners, there is a light that can reveal the truth and ultimately bring justice.